Thank you very much for joining us today for this important talk from Dr. Amy McLean. I'm just going to remind everybody, if you could please turn your cameras and microphones off. Um, Dr. McLean and I will stay on, me as just facilitator and Dr. McLean as the speaker, obviously. At the end of the presentation, we'll go back to a full screen. And if you would like to turn your cameras and microphones on, you can. If you would like to leave them off, you're totally welcome to. But I'll give some instructions about that at the end. But in the meantime, to save on our bandwidth and the ability for this presentation to happen without interruption, let's keep those things off for the time being. I'm also letting people in out of the waiting room during the this introduction part, so I'm doing a few things at once. Sorry if I'm a little disjointed. But again, I would like to welcome you all. I am Celeste, the biologist at Return to Freedom. I know if you're in this meeting today, you are familiar with Return to Freedom. And of course, you can learn more about us and our upcoming summer programs where you can come and visit the sanctuary and some of our satellite sanctuaries. Those are starting in May, so please check our website at returntofreedom.org to see updates about that or to sign up to get on our list about receiving information about those activities. But I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm going to launch right into introducing Dr. McLean. She is an associate professor in the Department of Animal Sciences at UC Davis. She holds degrees from the University of Georgia in animal science, dairy science, agribusiness, and reproductive physiology. And she did a PhD from Michigan State University in donkey nutrition, training, and management, which she has quite literally written the book on. Dr. McLean's work on donkey welfare focuses on donkeys around the world. She brings a wide breadth of real-world experience to improving donkey care, handling, and nutrition, and she brings knowledge to places that utilize donkeys for work and production. Dr. McLean and I were lucky enough to be placed together to train UC Davis's first responders to handle the campus livestock in the event of an emergency. This is how I met Dr. McLean. It was my introduction to her and her work, and her as a person. She is outstanding in terms of combining science and real compassion towards these long ears, and for then taking that out into the world and really looking for ways to improve welfare on many different layers and many different uses and positions that donkeys hold around the world. So I am pleased and honored to introduce to you Dr. McLean, and really grateful for her time today to talk about this important issue. Dr. McLean, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Celeste. Cool person you're talking about. I wish I could meet her one day. But yeah, I was so delighted to get to meet you many years ago. I just want to thank Return to Freedom for providing this opportunity. Talk about donkeys and then talk about an emerging issue that's really having a major impact on donkeys, but more importantly, on people who depend on donkeys around the world. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey about the Ejiao trade and my experience from traveling to China, experiencing this firsthand, to kind of where we are today. So I look forward to your questions at the end. Per request, I've taken out any somewhat alarming or gross pictures, as we could say, but this is a gross industry, so it's hard to avoid all of that. But anyway, moving forward, let's see here. We're going to look at what Ejiao is. Some people might be new to this idea, they've never heard of it, and then others might be very familiar. So we'll just do a review of what Ejiao is. How this industry is found in and outside of China, which might be surprising to some. And then also, where are we today and what does this look like for the future of donkeys? And that's where I really have a concern about the industry is what is the population? What are donkeys going to look like, say, another year or 2 years from now? So when we think about donkeys, and I think this is fascinating, I've got information from the Brook and then also the American Horse Council. And when you look at donkeys on a world population, there's as many donkeys and donkey hybrids, and talking about donkey hybrids, mules or hinnies produced by donkeys, as there are horses, or at least an equal number. And they're really important to the global economy, which we'll look at. Here in the United States, like I said, the American Horse Council did a wonderful survey in 2023. And according to their survey, donkeys and mules are the fifth largest population in the US. And this is accounting for mules or donkeys that have owners. So this is not really touching on the wild or free roaming feral populations as well. As you know, many of the uses for donkeys and mules are focused on in recreation use. Donkeys are wonderful if they're riding mounts for trail riding, show purposes, pets. A majority of these donkeys, though, around the world are used in the capacity of work. And then also there's another sector of donkeys I think a lot of people maybe are not as familiar with, and this is the production set, looking at donkeys that are used for human consumption in the form of meat, skin, and then also milk. So from a production aspect, I first became familiar with donkeys providing a food source for people. In 2014, I traveled to Italy, where the donkey dairy industry is literally booming. Donkey milk's the closest thing to human's milk, and it's been used for thousands of years around the world for medicinal purposes, but also because of this relationship and how the parameters are very similar to milk, human milk. When infants are transitioning from their mother's breast milk, it's very common to transition them to donkey milk because they'll have an allergic response to cow's milk. So this actually inspired a lot of research that's come about in Italy, Eastern Europe, because donkeys are now producing a product that's directly impacting human health or human needs. Um, from that, there's also, yes, a meat industry. The donkeys cannot produce milk forever, so there's a meat side of that as well. My interest in this industry, as with any donkey, is how can we learn more about the needs of donkeys, meeting their and meeting those needs, so from a welfare side. With that being said, the skin industry has also emerged, and there are welfare concerns related to that as well. So we're definitely seeing donkeys shift from being once thought of as a beast of burden. And I might add that donkeys were domesticated about 1,000 years before horses were, because they were easier to capture. So people in general have been benefiting from the use of donkeys for thousands of years. But we're seeing this shift now from not just a beast of burden or a companion or pet animal to now a production animal that's giving something different or something more back to people. And how will that affect the donkey population from a global basis? And just a little fun tip here. This is a group of donkeys in Death Valley we were working with. So moving forward, what is Ejiao? And again, some of you may be very familiar with this term. You're aware of the industry, but it's gelatinized donkey skin. And so they take the donkey skin, they boil it down, and they make a gelatin out of it. They make liquids out of it. And it's used in traditional Chinese medicine. The technical term for Ejiao is Colocori acini. And so oftentimes in scientific journals, you'll see reference to Colocori. But that's actually the term for Ejiao. It's an age-old tradition. The idea is that it improves anemia, hemoglobin composition, it helps prevent miscarriages. So there's an advantage from a theriogenology type aspect. And then also there's been some reports where it increases or improves libido across men and women. It's at least a 2,000-year-old tradition from the Shang and Ming dynasty in China. And it's also regional in China, which I think is important to mention, but popular throughout the country and other countries. The production requires today around 4 to 5 million donkey hides. So that's nearly 10% of the donkey population I just shared with you, which is 50 million donkeys. So if we need 5 million donkeys each year for this industry, well, we have 10 years before we run out of donkeys. So when we think about traditional Chinese medicine, I think it's important to mention there's lots of associations and health benefits we believe from traditional Chinese medicine, from acupuncture to practicing Tai Chi, and Ejiao falls into the same ideology of thoughts and how it may improve humans' well-being. So the interest in trying to improve donkey production came about, or at least my knowledge, it came about in 2017 when the first International Donkey Science Symposium was hosted in China. The idea behind this symposium was to advance the science, technology, and production behind donkeys. It brought together 16 international universities of donkey experts, scientists, and researchers, and they all shared their ideas and their expertise in donkeys. It was located in Shandong, China, in an area called Dong County. And Dong County is the capital of the donkey skin trade industry, and specifically a company called Dong-e. And it was organized by the China Animal Agriculture Association, the Ministry of Agriculture in China, and then also the largest animal and veterinary program in China in Beijing, the China Agriculture Institution. With this conference, a lot came out of it, and it was really interesting. And, working in this area of welfare, I try to go in with a really open mind. You may not change what people are, their thought process, but maybe you can change the application of how they interact with animals, and maybe you can make a difference. And again, what came from this conference, we learned that there was 128 128 breeds of donkeys that are endangered. So 79% of the domestic donkeys are in the threat of extinction. And bringing all these different scientists and researchers together, a lot of ideas and knowledge was exchanged. There was also, of course, the focus of looking at the demand for donkey products, how that was increasing, what those interests were. The other thing that came about was there was a $10 million research grant call that was sponsored by the government in China as well as this donkey company. And so that was very exciting for a lot of the researchers, because when you are working with an animal that's a symbol of poverty, it's extremely difficult to generate any type of funding to further our knowledge. And again, donkeys have been around for thousands of years. We know very little about them. When I started my PhD in 2006, there was just kind of the break of knowledge coming about in terms of dietary needs for donkeys, differences in blood chemistry, but we're still just barely even tapping on that door of really knowing the physiology and needs of donkeys. So from another aspect, that was kind of exciting to learn that there was an opportunity maybe to expand our knowledge about donkeys. But what was backing all this, of course, was the donkey skin trade industry. And these are just some images from the elaborate Ejiao museum that was on hand. And there's a donkey breed that comes from this area in China that is an all-black donkey called the Dejiao donkey. And they are the most prized or sought after donkey for this purpose. And I think the images speak for themselves. So another thing that's really important from a cultural perspective, donkeys are considered to be the closest animal in this universe or on Earth to a dragon. And for a lot of people, it's really important in China if they can be very close to a dragon. So there's a saying, in heaven there's dragon meat, on earth there is donkey meat. So this is their way of culturally practicing being close to a donkey. Within this area where this first meeting was hosted, you could easily walk into multiple stores, find all sorts of different donkey products. Every part of the donkey was utilized, from its skin, its milk. In my hotel room, was even a beautifying mask. It was a very long ride to the donkey facility. But I said no. So, but these were just some of the different items that you could find that are age-old items that have been utilized in their culture. There was also a growing interest for donkey cosmetics. There's a lot of benefits to donkey milk, so they've made different lotions and soaps and things like that. But these were all things that were readily available. And then within the hotel lobby, if you were going to have breakfast, these were some of the items for breakfast. I was extremely strict vegetarian that first trip. Um, but donkey was found in everything, and there were also multiple donkey restaurants. But considering, again, this is the closest way to get to that next maybe level of living, being close to a dragon, donkey meat is readily consumed in this region of China. So moving forward, they developed, like I said, an Ejiao museum, and they've later developed a big museum for donkeys, and they've mapped out different areas throughout China where different breeds of donkeys are found. So throughout all of China, there's 8 breeds of donkeys. There was also reference to different parts of the donkey veterinary standpoint, from different parts of the brain of the donkey to ears. And then, of course, there was reference to how different parts of the donkey could be utilized in this meat and production industry. Um, Part of the museum also showed a really great pictorial kind of hologram version of a donkey farm, and everything's beautiful, and there's green mountains and grass for the donkeys, but kind of shows what it would look like for donkeys to live in China. um, so they did a great job of marketing. Again, this walks you through the museum. It just shows you how they're trying to show off and showcase donkeys, the different breeds of donkeys, where those are located throughout China. Because a lot of times about donkeys, you have this image of a small gray cute little Shrek donkey, but knowing there's actual breeds of donkeys and that there was some interest in trying to preserve these breeds within China, I think is important to mention. There were 16 farms around China that were producing donkeys specifically for this company, and the donkey farms had signs that were promoting, yes, this is a donkey farm here. And the donkey farms had up to 10,000 donkeys on each of them. So when I was there in 2017, the demand was 2 million donkeys. It's now grown to 4 to 5 million donkeys. So it's doubled, almost tripled. The China Agriculture Department and the government was really pushing for community programs for donkey farming, to try to set up impoverished areas to have other means of making an income versus just row crop or grain farming. However, this same approach was done in the early 80s with wildlife farming to try to meet the demands of things such as bear ball, tiger bones, and things like this. So now they're doing it with donkeys. And again, that focus was on producing donkeys for the use for Chinese traditional medicine. Um, Again, there was that research call, and there were 17 different universities that were represented. And I'll get back to Brazil and Australia in a minute, but this was a picture of just looking at the different products and the different stages of production. So now we're going to take a little tour of the donkey farm there so you can see how they're attempting to be self-sufficient, but we all know it's not quite working. So they had an area where all the jacks, all the male donkeys were kept. They had a sign that said their name, how tall they were. And then the male donkeys were brought in for breeding in a breeding shed area. And then there was a separate side to their lab where the jinnies were brought in for different exams and things to that nature. There were other barns that were separated just for the jinnies and their foals. And again, from a welfare perspective, I'm there trying to make the world better for these donkeys. Even if it's for a short period of time, how can we improve this? And some of the things you notice, there's no bedding, very hard concrete stalls. And then also, we were somewhat concerned about the capacity, but it's essentially a farm that is keeping them for 2 to 3 years time period before they're utilized for this purpose. And the donkeys were fed similar to a silage that would be fed to cattle. And then they were maintained similar to what we would see with feedlots for cows. There was shade for the donkeys. There was also fans because it could get quite warm there. There were different poles in the barns where you'd see the donkeys scratching and things of that nature. Again, this is just shows you a little bit of the inside look. And oh, I'm going to turn that back on because they were actually playing music for us as we could see the donkeys. But I've traveled to about 40 countries. I've seen a lot of donkeys. These are definitely not the worst donkey conditions I've seen. And then this is a private farm. Most of the farms were a co-op, but they were separate, we believe, from the actual company farm. And these farms would have anywhere from a couple hundred to over 1,000 head of donkeys. So again, from a welfare perspective, I was concerned most of these donkeys are ear tagged. I've also seen some nonprofits here in the US ear tagging their donkeys. Donkeys' ears are not made to wear ear tags. So anyway, there's also a live trading for donkeys in China. And this is what you see.
Okay. It's the price. This is the price, and this is the kilogram. This is the real time doing. Yeah.
So it's real time donkey trading in China is what you're seeing, and how much they're bringing price per pound and how many donkeys are being.
Hey, Dr. McLean may have lost
The
me. Oh, there
industry
we go.
is, and not only how big the industry is, but how mechanized the product is. So all the different assemblies that goes into making this. This is really this is a big industry. So I think that I was shocked by that. The other thing I will share, in that one county, there were 200 companies all selling donkey skin products. Dong-er is the largest company with that mechanization, that.
Looks like we have some internet bandwidth issues. We'll wait a few seconds and see if she comes back. Hang on, everybody. I'm going to text her. Oops, Dr. McLean, we've lost your feed. There you go. Now you have to unmute yourself.
I'm back. Sorry, I've been fighting with Wi-Fi all day. Okay, so just I was going over a little bit about where donkeys are coming from if they're not coming from these large company farms found throughout China, or the private farms, the co-op farms. So where are they actually sourcing them from? And low middle income countries throughout Africa has been a major target, as well as some countries in Asia, such as Pakistan, India. They've also provided donkeys into this pipeline, as well as Latin America. So those donkeys have been sourced, some willingly by their owners, and then others have been stolen and sold into this, excuse me, into this trade. There is also interest in the mammoth donkey, which is a very large breed of donkey here in the United States, which is a composite of other breeds of donkeys. There were buyers that came to the States around the same time, 2016 to 2018, trying to buy donkeys here and then export them to China. So that was another area they were trying to get donkeys. Another target has been wild free roaming feral populations, especially in Australia and Brazil. In Australia, most of these donkeys we know are euthanized through shooting them and things like that. They're looked at as a pest until Australia started having lots of fires, and then they recognized maybe the donkey was useful for decreasing the fires. But Australia was one of the countries that was actually sent government officials to that first meeting to try to source their feral donkeys directly to China. So they had a purpose versus just going in and shooting the donkeys from a helicopter. In Brazil, it's also very interesting because some of the most prized donkeys that sell for the highest probably prices, the Pega donkey is from Brazil, but there's other breeds of donkeys in the north called the Nordestino donkey, which is a smaller gray donkey that sadly has somewhat lost its value, and they've been rounded up, put in corrals, and then they were going to be shipped and have been shipped in the past to one state in Brazil where equine slaughter is allowed. And again, they were sourcing those donkeys directly to China. They were part of the second donkey conference. So that's where the donkeys are coming from. Can I say if they're coming from the States or not? I don't have enough information to share if they are. We do know there are pipelines of animals, equine, that do travel to other countries that come from the States. I think any animal that doesn't have an owner could easily be a target for this industry and become part of it. A lot of the real transport, a lot of the real challenges outside of just the source of donkeys is how these donkeys are being transported in other countries. And this is a picture from Nigeria where donkeys are put on trucks like this. They're actually stacked on top of each other as their legs are bound, and it's a horrific way to travel. But also, if you've done any travel to East or West Africa or even Asia and you've been on a bus with lots of people and animals, the people travel in pretty horrific conditions as well. The other way is also the movement of lots of groups of donkeys, which have led to disease transmission concerns. The map that you see, so this is pretty much West Africa. I worked in Mali for my PhD, and there was a concern at the time when I worked there in 2006 through 2010 what to do with working donkeys at the end of their working life capacity. In a lot of countries, it's against the law to euthanize them because of cultural perspectives and beliefs. And a lot of these countries, that is a concern. So the donkey reaches its end of the life as a working donkey and it's literally turned loose on the streets to fend for itself. And they look very similar to the donkey in this photo. But donkeys from most of these West Africa countries are going to Nigeria because Nigeria has a larger Christian population, where donkey slaughter is allowed. In Muslim countries, generally it's discouraged. But through that transport, the walking, the movement of donkeys from all of these Western countries and into Nigeria, again, has brought out a concern for different diseases that affect donkeys, such as influenza. They're highly susceptible, and then that transmission to other working equid populations or equine populations. In East and South Africa, the trade routes run from Ethiopia, Somalia, all the way down to Zimbabwe. Also, of course, there's been reports in Botswana, but those were trying to get to three abattoirs or slaughterhouses that were set up by Chinese in Kenya. There's also, of course, lots of bush slaughter that's occurred, which is a real concern from a welfare standpoint, but also from an environmental standpoint. I was asked not to share any gross pictures or videos, but one that I have is actually further north from Kenya, but up in Egypt, where there's just boneyards of donkey carcasses, and that's a real concern. So, considering donkeys and their meaning to low to middle income countries and populations, they supply 99% of the workforce. And that's where a majority of these donkeys are found. And again, this is information thanks to the Brook that they have gathered on a lot of their research into this. And donkeys are so important on a global basis for gender equality and then also to children. Women are oftentimes not allowed to work larger working draft animals like oxen and things of that nature. They're also intimidating. There's been a shift to donkeys also because of their low economies in terms of how easy it is to care for them. And they're very easy and docile for most children to work with as well. Donkeys are within the reach of the poorest of the poor people. And when you remove this source of work or help from our poorest of the poor people, it only pushes them into poverty even further. And there's even a saying actually in Ethiopia that a woman will not marry a man who does not own a donkey in fear of becoming his donkey. But this is what's happening because this is one of the cheapest forms of labor other than human labor. So just again, looking at this global population and what's happening, and we've got donkeys and we have mules. This is from FAO and a study that was done in 2021. And you see the report. So we've got mules in brown on the bottom and we've got blue up top as our donkeys. So donkeys stayed pretty stable, about 40 million until 2012. And then actually we saw an increase up to 2014, and it continued to rise until 2018. You might be going, well, that doesn't align with this industry that's now having an impact on donkeys. And you're exactly right. But also, what it's suggesting is that more people shifted from using other working equids, likely to donkeys. So there was a greater demand for donkeys. Also, the donkey dairy industry has increased the number of donkeys for the use of donkey milk. So these are not all just working donkeys. These are donkeys in other areas. Also, we could think of the United States and how the donkey population is increasing and rising because of their interest as pets, recreational animals, and in that sense. This is another image from that same study that I've captured to share with you. But this shows a positive trend of donkeys increasing. But remember, I was in China in 2017, and the need for donkeys for the hide industry was 2 million. Today it's 4 to 5 million. So I would love to see some even more recent survey data. The other thing to keep in mind with survey data, oftentimes countries that are more difficult to access or challenging to reach because of various unrest that's occurring, this is just an estimate of the population. It may not truly be the population. So what's happening in China, so again, this is looking at from 1992 to today, what we think. So they've gone from being the largest country for donkeys and mules to now one of the smaller countries. I think they're still in the top 10. We'll look at that in a minute. But they've gone from 11 million animals all the way down to 1.4 million. Part of this shift also is related to mechanization and the use of tractors and being able to reach areas where farming was at one point more difficult with those tractors are now able to do that. A change in how farming is occurring, but they have been replaced. But we can also believe that the skin trade industry has had an impact on China's own donkey population. So again, just another graphic looking at more of a global view of the donkey population. We find about 60% of the population is in Africa. So that's alarming, thinking that is the secondary or the backup source for animals used in this capacity, with Ethiopia being number one, followed by Sudan, and then Pakistan, which has a direct pipeline into China for the skin trade industry. Then Chad, and then followed by Mexico, which at one point was the third largest donkey and mule population. And there's lots of equine slaughterhouses throughout Mexico. It's commonly practiced there as well as in a lot of Central and South America. There is a demand for donkey meat and donkey hides, so those facilities are meeting the needs, I'm sure, for China. But again, you see how China's declined along with Kenya and then some of the other countries that were once known for having large populations of donkeys. So why do these numbers matter? Why are we interested in this? And again, some of this information coming from a report that the Brook has done on working equid data. So thanks to them, and they're great resources. But all of the countries that rely on working equids, again, not been surveyed or were not able to actually go in and find out what's going on there. But again, a large number, we can say what's happening. And the alarming thing is what's going to happen? So if this is from 36 countries, and we only do this every 10 years, I think this is the bigger part that I have a hard time with. If we're only surveying every 10 years and we have a need for 5 million donkeys and there's 50 million donkeys, pretty simple math. In 10 years, we won't have donkeys. So to me, that's concerning. So what is this replacing? So how are we going to replace donkeys? And we'll talk about Africa here in a minute as a group of the different countries coming together, but this is just an example in Kenya, where a football group, so they were playing soccer, they won, and what they won, instead of a trophy, they won donkeys because they need a way to refurbish the donkeys in their communities that have been lost to the donkey skin trade industry. Also want to mention donkey's gestation period takes 12 months. So it takes a month to generate another donkey. So that's a long time turnaround. So in a few years, what will happen? What will happen to the donkey population in China? Will it be completely wiped out? Will it be diminished? And we can see the trend here from 1992 to 2 years ago, 11 million all the way down to 1 to maybe 2 million donkeys. So some ways to maybe prevent the world not having a donkey, and I can't imagine a world without a donkey. Different groups of non-government organizations, NGOs have come together. They're part of a larger group called ISWE, and these groups provide free veterinary care and things like that in a lot of developing nations. They came together in 2024 because they were very concerned about Africa as a continent and what was going to happen. And they met at the African Union conference, and they adopted a moratorium on donkey skin trade and trying to protect the people that rely daily on these donkeys across the whole continent. So not just this country or what's happening in East Africa or South Africa. And again, the trade was banned across 10 African countries at that point. Everywhere from, again, West Africa, Mali to Botswana, Tanzania, Niger. So that was a step in the right direction. And then a really powerful piece of information came about by Lauren Johnston. She reached out to me when she was writing this. I was like, you have to go to this donkey conference. And she did. And it really helped generate a lot of interest in her paper, but it was breaking down the industry and China's influence South Africa and their and how this market was really shaping the future of impoverishing people even more. And could the whole continent, could all these countries actually come together and ban the Ejiao industry? And she was pretty successful in getting them to come together with this publication that she created. So again, I think that's something to note and also to be aware of, what does the future look like for people that depend upon donkeys, but especially for people in rural areas, women, young women and children in this continent. So another thing I'd like to mention, and again, another shout out to the Brook, but the Brook USA, they've actually helped propose a bill. It's been proposed a couple different times to Congress. This has been being sponsored by a representative out of Virginia. But this bill is looking at prohibiting transportation, sale, the purchase of donkeys or donkey hides in this capacity of producing Ejiao. And where do you buy Ejiao? You might be like, well, okay, but this doesn't really affect me. This is something that's going on. It's only in China. That's not happening here. Well, actually, it is happening here. The US is the third largest consumer for Ejiao products. And where are they buying them? Where does everybody buy everything? Amazon. So next time you see an Amazon package, maybe your neighbor's getting, you might have second thoughts about what's in their package. It could be kolakori. It could be donkey hide. And this is what the gelatin product looks like. But like I said, it also can be in liquid. You can make it for a face mask. There's lots of different ways you can also put it on different food products. But this is what you can easily find and buy on Amazon. This was a product directly from Dong-er, the company that hosted the conference that I've attended twice, and they've added flowers to it to make it look even better. But you notice down here at the bottom, it says, sorry, this item cannot be shipped to your selected address. So that's really exciting because here in California, in December of 2023, there was a lawsuit that was brought about by a group called the Center of Contemporary Equine Studies, and they wanted to halt the sale of Ejiao in California. And this past January, a judge upheld this lawsuit and said, yes, this actually violates California's existing law looking at the sale of equine meat for human consumption, because this is an equine product being used for consumption. It's just a different part of the meat as the skin. So we see this as a major victory for donkeys. Maybe this will also help create traction in Washington. We at least hope it will. We know a bill's been reintroduced and it's part of the SAFE Act of 2025. And that was introduced last year. Again, it looks at prohibiting slaughter of equine. So I wish they'd said donkeys here. This is direct language I copied from the Senate, but it says horses and mules. They need to say donkeys. I've had many discussions with very highly educated, even colleagues, if donkeys are equine or not, and they are equine. So I hope this will somehow be updated to say donkeys because there it excludes them. If you are interested in learning a little more about this growing industry, and again, mention why it's growing. This product at one point was only available for the very elite or wealthy of China. As the middle continued to grow throughout China, and people want to look young, and they want to have reproductive success, they have invested in Ejiao, and they've helped grow this market the middle class has. But anyway, if you're interested in knowing the history behind Ejiao, more where we're at today, some of the really powerful ads and campaigns and movies that have been made about this product. We recently wrote a 2-series textbook dedicated to donkey and mule medicine. And a good friend of mine, Mary Ting, she's in New York, and she wrote the chapter on gelatinized donkey skin. And it will really be eye-opening to you about this industry, how powerful it is, and this connection, and it following under the umbrella of traditional Chinese medicine. So with that, thank you all for your time. I hope you've found something useful or resourceful in this talk. And again, a big thanks to my dear friend Celeste, and also Return to Freedom for bringing light to this important and oftentimes hard topic to discuss.
Thank you so much, Dr. McLean. If I could get you to unshare your screen, and then that'll make the rest of us a little bit bigger. And then whoever is interested and would like to turn their camera on, if you could turn your cameras on, but keep your microphone muted, so we don't have a lot of feedback. And then if people have questions, if you'll use the raise hand feature. See, Julia is modeling excellent behavior. If you'll use the raise hand feature, I'll just call in order. Amy, I'll watch you for a signal. I know that you are going to have to run at a drop dead time, but we'll continue with questions for as long as we can. So Julia, go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to ask your question.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, Amy. I just wanted to point out that Brook USA has a whole section on their website about the bill to block the importation of Ejiao products, and it's really easy to write to your legislator. It's just a couple of clicks, so I would encourage everyone who hasn't to please do so.
Thank you, Julia. Appreciate that. I will put up a slide at the end with some numbers you guys can write down if you're interested in doing exactly what Julia just said. Deborah, do you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, this is the first time I've heard about the donkey milk instead of cow milk because babies have allergies. I find that fascinating and worrisome. How common is that for people to use the donkey milk for their babies?
Yeah, great question, Deborah. In Italy, some of the research has shown that over 40% of the population there is allergic to cow's milk protein. And it has to do with the size of the protein and absorption. And donkey milk has been used for, again, thousands of years, thanks to the donkey. Cleopatra used to take daily baths in donkey milk because there's different antioxidant factors to the milk that's really good for your skin. So, the average lifespan for a dairy donkey is 15 to 18 years. And again, the welfare varies similar to the dairy industry here. So
Interesting. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Monica, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi, I'll just go ahead and unmute my audio. So I missed what Julia said, but was it regarding the Senate bill? And can we contact the sponsors and co-sponsors so that they can add donkeys before it starts to move throughout the process? And then is there a substitute that could be like a plant-based substitute for gelatin that might have some of the properties that people are supposedly looking for? And then I have two more questions, sorry. So there's the American Horse Slaughter Prevention Act. So they were excluded from, because I know there's loopholes with the act and they're trying to close the loopholes, but were donkeys excluded from that and it was just wild horses? And then the population in China has not increased that much. So is it just that they're finding more products to make up that use the donkey parts? So thank you.
Okay, I will let Julie or Celeste circle back about the specific bills. But I do know the language oftentimes is excluding. That was a problem also with the Horse Protection Act. It did not include donkeys and mules. And it's like you've forgotten about the fifth largest population. But I think they can speak to that better than I can. So the question about, is there an alternative source, like a vegetable source to the donkey skin? Yes, there is. And there was some wonderful research that just recently came out of Brazil. And I'm embarrassed, I don't remember which university. It may have been in Sao Paulo. But anyway, the concern with that, and I reached out to Mary and my friend that wrote the gelatin chapter, and I said, do you think they're going to use this? Because it's traditional medicine, and they've come out with alternative sources for bear ball and also, tiger bones and some of the other wildlife products that are utilized in that capacity. She said because they're traditionalist, the likelihood of the adoption of an alternative source of Ejiao is not very high amongst the Chinese culture, in her opinion. And she is Chinese, so I think she has a perspective that I definitely cannot personally share from that. So that's disappointing. The other thing that I will mention, there's been some testing that's been done from some of the NGOs that have great interest in donkeys, and they have found that a majority of the products are not 100% donkey. And that probably explains why all the donkeys have not been wiped out in China. So I think that's very interesting too, from a quality control standpoint. You think you're buying Ejiao, but it may only have 10% donkey skin in it, and it could also be source pig or something else. And I'm sorry, I think I forgot some of the other questions that you may have asked.
I'm putting up the information about contacting your representatives and some of the things you can do to help right now, so people can write it down or screenshot it if you're interested. I'll pull it down in a second. I don't actually know the specifics of the SAFE Act and why different terminology is used or not used. I did just reach out to our lobbyist to ask, and I don't think it's intentional that donkeys are not included. I think there's just a belief that saying equines is enough. And I think Dr. McLean's point is valid that maybe it's not. So I will definitely poke at some of the folks for Return to Freedom that do work on our behalf for the SAFE Act. But frankly, I don't really know the answer, but I will find out and shoot an email to those of you that participated in the webinar today with whatever I find out beyond what I've just told you right now. And again, on your screen here is a little bit more information about sort of next steps you can do. Any other questions?
Hey, Celeste, can I ask a quick question?
That's who you are. That's Stephen. Hello, good to see you. Yes, please ask a
Great,
question.
great to see you. I'm very fond of donkeys and burros, as you would as you know. And Amy, thank you so much. This was amazing. I had just two quick questions. I mean, one was sort of that call to action, and I'm always curious because I work in this space, and I'm always like, okay, well, let people know, and you kind of like, okay, I'm concerned about it. What do I do next? And and a lot of it seems to always like call your elected official. It seems like the usual steps. And I'm just wondering, like, if there's just any other things that can be done, especially when there's a global issue around this. You Americans are so provincial. Like, what can be done to actually help this? But that's one question, just sort of that, what literally can be done beyond just contacting your elected official. And I just would love to hear from anybody on this Zoom, because I think this is really important. Does anyone know about the donkeys in Riverside County and San Bernardino, the ones that are in Moreno Valley? And I'm working with them, and I find, again, talk about provincial, I find Southern California is very provincial. And there's 2,500 wild donkeys that are in Riverside County, free roaming, that are now boxed in because of development. They're getting hit by cars, they're getting hit by trains, they're being shot by arrows, they're being attacked by wild animals. And there's another sanctuary called Donkey Land that has 600 there. And Bob Barker bought 2,000 acres, but they need all. So I'm not trying to do a pitch on that, but I'm just wondering, because the awareness, I'm just shocked of the lack of awareness that these majestic animals are in peril, and there's thousands of them on the UC Riverside campus and everything. So Amy, because you work in this space, I'd love to find out if you know about this. And anyone else can just jump in to say, because I'm trying to build awareness for these guys, because this is like a real local thing, and these guys are in danger.
Yes, Steve, thank you. Thanks for your comments. I'll start with the donkeys that are in Riverside. It was my understanding that a nonprofit out of Texas was working on trying to gather those donkeys at one point, called Peaceful Valley. I do not know where they're at with that process. But that would be a group to contact, because they do go in, they
Yeah,
gather.
just to jump in real quick, sorry to interrupt, but so they're super controversial about that. They're not even welcomed anymore. And so the idea being, number one is the community wants to keep them home. That's what the sanctuary does, keeps them home. Everybody wants, there's over 100 years history of them being there. So some people think that they lied about where they went. Some people afraid they went to the kill pens, went to Mexico. Their persona non grata is my polite way of saying something publicly. And they so they took them out of the community, and it was hugely controversial. And so the whole point of this is not to remove them, it's to keep them home. So,
Well, again, I can't speak to what happened afterwards. I have worked with them. I've worked with them in Death Valley, Fort Irwin, with groups they've collected, and then also in their San Angelo area. But I greatly understand and appreciate trying to keep the donkeys where they're from, because the amount of stress that occurs to these animals when they are relocated and they're taken out of an ecological system that they're adapted to, and then you put them in a completely different one, is probably not fair to that animal. But I don't know any other information on proactiveness of trying to protect that group of donkeys. And those are the groups that I fear could easily fall into this pipeline, because they don't have owners. So if there's some way, that community could claim ownership of the donkeys and care for them with water and putting out maybe salt and things like that, that would be great. Somehow keep them off the roads. I've been faced with that in other countries. I was brought into Bonaire a few years ago, similar situation. The donkeys have been there as long as people have. There's lots of problems with them getting on the road and being killed from traffic. But it was like, how can the donkeys and the people of Bonaire all live together? So this seems to be an international problem, because people love their donkeys. And like you said, they don't want them being sent off somewhere else. But I'm sorry, I wish I had more information on what's happening there, how to save the donkeys. I've been contacted over the years about that population, but never actually been able to go there and be on the ground and see it firsthand or help in any real kind of more active way. In terms of how to prevent or how to make a difference in the Ejiao industry, I think that's a really great and powerful question. And I think, again, kudos to California and the judge at the Superior Court upholding the lawsuit. I think that will speak, I hope that will speak to Washington and to the group that's putting their effort towards trying to get a ban on Amazon. It's my understanding there's also a petition going around to Amazon to remove the product. So I think utilizing the slide that Celeste has shared, and then also checking out what the Brook USA has on their website might give you a better idea of how to be active. But I'm sorry, I don't directly know what else to do.
I'm gonna, Dr. McLean, I'm gonna ask you a question that I think that you probably struggle with, but when faced with essentially global issues of welfare like this, and knowing that, you know, you yourself are just one person, but you're connected through this huge network, through the work that you do. How do you keep from being overwhelmed and remain involved in all of these different ways, pushing for improvement in kind of every direction, but also having to focus? Like, how do you make choices like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because compassion fatigue is real. And I think that's something that probably on a daily basis a lot of veterinarians face from, a lot of things that they see in their practice, and not comparing this to that type of work. But it's really hard sometimes. And when I was working on this presentation, I relived my experience of going to China, and I was really concerned about what I was going to see there and how that would affect me. And I watched a lot of panda TV when I was in China. And the pandas were really, they were great. They kept me going there. But so what I try to do is I think about the donkey first, and like, how can I help the donkey? What will make a difference? I personally cannot stop this industry. And that's why I shared just how big this company is. It's part of the Chinese government. This is part of this overlapping idea of traditional Chinese medicine that probably everybody on this call has in some form or fashion utilized or practiced, from maybe Tai Chi to acupuncture to drinking Chinese tea. So at some point, we've probably all participated in some form of Chinese medicine. There's also this idea of this is a cultural perspective. It's not my culture. So again, how do I help the donkey? And maybe I can't change the whole culture, but how do I make this better for the donkey? And that's what keeps me going. And when I went to the farms there, again, concerned about what I was going to see, but then what I saw, and granted, maybe I didn't see everything, which I believe I didn't. From what I did see and experience, the conditions were far better there than what I've seen here in the United States, where there's obese lamanitic donkeys with no friends. So I think we have to take this all into perspective. If I can make a difference to those donkeys, if I can make some suggestions on how to improve their life for that 2 or 3 years, or the donkeys in Italy from a dairy perspective, then I've done my job, hopefully, of helping improve that animal's life and just removing the human aspect of it.
Ooh, I appreciate that answer, Dr. McLean. Dr. McLean, let me check in on time. We're at 12:29 Pacific time. Do you have a few more minutes?
Yes, I do. I
Okay,
do.
great. Then Julia, you have another question. Go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up to what Amy said. A huge petition was delivered to Amazon. It had over 100,000 signatures, and they wouldn't even open the front door. That was a year ago. And then also the American Association of Equine Practitioners, which is our horse vets, have a position statement. It has been presented by the lobbyists to the legislators that they go visit. Maybe Amy's coming, but I'm certainly going to lobby after the American Horse Council meeting in June. So there will be probably representatives from a number of the other horse welfare groups. So stay tuned.
Thank you very much for that, Julia. I'm going to call out our Executive Director of Return to Freedom right now and founder, Netta DeMeo, who is watching this, just to offer, if you had anything you wanted to say, you don't have to, but if you would like to, I see that you're on with us. You're muted.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks, Amy. This is great. Yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, the boroughs are covered in the SAFE Act, of course. Of course. And another thing I just wanted to mention is a project that I've been involved with a man named Alejandro Carrillo. I don't think he's jumped on. I wanted him to, but he if you look him up, it's really exciting because he's one of my mentors with regenerative holistic grazing, and he has done amazing things. And starting down in Chihuahua, Mexico, on land that basically was turning into Libya, basically Mars, cracked earth, very dry, etc. And over the last, I don't know, 15 years or 20 years, they've transformed about 400,000 acres in the whole community of ranches that has changed the climate down there and turned desert back into grasslands. And that's what he does. So if you want to look at, and we're going to do, I'm going to invite him to do a webinar. Oh, Alejandro, he's on. Can you, yeah, it's just very exciting what's happening. So for the last few years, he's had some pilot programs on government land, and we've been able to save, with our colleagues, all seated in a barn, we've saved, oh God, over 42 donkeys now that participated in grazing on his pilot program to do to regenerate the soil, basically to build biomass and recreate these desert sand environments, basically in Arizona. And so the next project that he wants to do will involve 50 donkeys. So we save them, but we can't absorb 50. So I'm just putting it out there. Maybe we'll work with the people down at Donkeyland. I don't know, but I know that we graze. He can talk a little bit more about it. But if you go to Grasslands Regeneration Project, desertgrasslands.com, that's his website to find out more about it. But we have been doing this for now 5 years in San Luis Obispo with donkeys, cows, and horses all together. None of the animals are used for food. And it's simply at one of our sanctuary locations in San Luis Obispo, and it's been transformative. So a lot of what Alejandro is doing is to try to elevate the status of the donkey and to the ranchers, because he believes, and I'll let him speak for himself. He's right here. Welcome, Alejandro. Just really quick, we just have to keep it really short, but we want to follow up with another webinar with him on because his words, donkeys are the best for regenerating the soil. So I'm going to let him take it from here. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Celeste. And Alejandro, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, folks. I was a bit kind of missed the original time. But no, yeah, as you said, I think we have found that the Western US, and obviously it's not unique to the Western US, but also Australia and many, many places that we've been, Northern Mexico. The best tool that we have to regenerate the land is the donkeys, because the donkeys can take a lot of forage that is oxidized, that is very stemmy, that the cows will not, or the sheep will not. So and then if you have broken land, the donkeys can actually go anywhere. I feel donkeys are really like the secret weapon that we have to revert the certification that we're seeing in many parts of the world.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We are at the top of the hour, and Dr. McLean has done an excellent job covering really a complicated global issue. Again, a reminder, you can find more information on Return to Freedom's website. You all know how to reach any of us via email. If there are any questions you have that you would like a follow-up on, you can email me, science@returntofreedom.org, and I will make sure we get the answer for you. And remember that our summer programs are coming up at Return to Freedom. You can check our website for information about those events, which are very interactive, and you'll learn a lot more about the issue more broadly, and get to visit some of the sanctuary sites. So again, thank you very much, Dr. McLean. Really appreciate your time, and also very appreciative of those of you who signed up and who supported Return to Freedom in doing so quite directly. We are very, very appreciative. Thank you for participating in our series of webinars, and we hope to see you again. Next month is going to be Dr. Sarah King talking about some of the new research happening on our public lands around wild horse and burro behavior, and welfare issues around that behavior. We don't have a date yet, but I will make sure that we email you that date if you participated today so that you get first right of refusal for that series. So thank you very much. Again, thank you very much, Dr. McLean. And we'll see you guys next time.